All right, today we're going to dive into a super dense 80-plus page corporate document. Sounds fun, right? But stick with me, because hidden inside all the numbers and jargon is a really fascinating story about what one of America's biggest companies, T-Mobile, is doing with its billions. And spoiler alert, they've been on a massive spending spree.
And, it's a really good question to ask, because when a company the size of T-Mobile starts throwing around billions of dollars, it's not just some boring accounting exercise. No, they're making these huge bets that are going to shape the future of, well, everything. Our wireless service, our home internet, and believe it or not, even the ads we see every day. So let's get into it. So this document we're digging through, it's called a Form 10Q. The easiest way to think about it is like a report card that big public companies have to file with the government every few months. And let me tell you, this one is just packed with juicy details. It really pulls back the curtain on a company making some absolutely massive strategic moves.
All right, first up, let's start with the big question. What has T-Mobile actually been buying with all this cash? The short answer? A lot. They've been on a multi-billion-dollar shopping spree, and they're expanding their empire in some really, really interesting directions.
Okay, let's just start with this number right here. $2.8 billion. And get this, that's not the grand total of everything they spent. Nope, that's just the cash they dropped on one single day, August 1st, 2025, to close out one single massive purchase.
So what was that huge purchase? They bought the entire wireless business from their competitor, US Cellular. Just like that, in one single move, T-Mobile swallowed up over 4.5 million new customers. They also got a ton of valuable spectrum. That's the invisible airwaves our phones use to send and receive signals. And they took over all their retail stores. It's a classic move, really. Just buy your competition to get bigger, faster, especially in parts of the country where maybe they weren't as strong before.
Now, here's a kind of fascinating little accounting detail from this deal. It's something called goodwill. For this US Cellular buyout, T-Mobile put $231 million on the books as goodwill. So what is that? It's basically the premium they paid for all the stuff you can't touch, the valuable, intangible things. We're talking about the US Cellular brand name, its loyal customers, and just the overall potential to mash these two companies together and make everything run more efficiently.
But it's not all just about gobbling up competitors. And this is where their whole strategy gets really interesting. See, T-Mobile isn't just trying to become a bigger phone company. It looks like they're making a very deliberate, calculated move into a whole new world, digital ad tech. Check this out. They dropped over $600 million on a company called Vistar Media. These are the guys who power the ads you see on, like, digital billboards. And then they spent another $180 million on a company called Bliss, which is another digital advertising firm. This sends a super clear signal, right? T-Mobile is actively looking for new ways to make money that have nothing to do with your monthly phone bill.
And don't worry, they're not done in the wireless world. They also snapped up a company called Kayana Corp. You might not know that name, but you definitely know who they own. Mint Mobile. Yep, that Mint Mobile. This deal, worth up to $1.35 billion, was a huge play to grab a much bigger piece of the prepaid wireless market.
And just when you think they're done, nope. The spending didn't stop there. On top of growing their wireless business and jumping headfirst into ad tech, T-Mobile is now investing billions to become a major player in high-speed home internet. They're going right after the cable companies.
And the way they're doing it is actually pretty smart. They're not out there digging up streets to lay their own fiber from scratch. No, that would take forever. Instead, they're forming these joint ventures. They've pumped over $5.5 billion into partnerships with companies called Lumos and Metronet. In return, they get a 50% stake, and bam, they instantly have over 800,000 fiber customers, just like that.
Okay, let's just take a breath. That is a ton of buying and investing. The total bill is easily in the tens of billions. So, yeah, the obvious next question is, how in the world are they paying for all of this?
Well, let's look at another number. Just in the first 9 months of 2025, T-Mobile had to get their hands on over $3.7 billion in new financing just to keep this growth engine running. And they pulled it off in a couple of key ways.
So one of their main tools is something called senior notes. Honestly, the easiest way to think about it is that the company is basically selling IOUs to huge investors. It's just corporate debt, and it's a super common and really effective way for a company this size to raise a boatload of cash quickly.
And yeah, that financial report lays it all out. They issued $1.7 billion in these notes just for the U.S. Cellular deal. They raised another $1 billion with notes that were backed by their own stuff, their assets. And then they pulled another $1 billion from a credit line, almost like a giant credit card, specifically to buy new network equipment.
But it's not all about borrowing money. They've got other tools in the toolbox. To help pay for all this growth and kind of balance the books, they also made a really strategic sale. They sold off some of their 3.45 gigahertz spectrum licenses, and that brought in a cool $2 billion in cold, hard cash.
Okay, but this kind of aggressive, fast-paced expansion and all this complicated money shuffling, it's never that simple, right? There's always a catch. And if you read the fine print of the report, you'll see it's filled with some pretty significant risks and ongoing legal headaches for T-Mobile.
One of the biggest ones, a ghost that's still haunting them, is the fallout from that massive cyber attack back in 2021. I mean, that one incident has had this long, painful, and very, very expensive history, from the moment it happened right up to the legal and government mess they're still dealing with today.
So what was the biggest single price tag from that breach? $350 million. That's how much T-Mobile had to put into a fund to settle the massive class action lawsuit from all the millions of customers who had their data stolen.
And honestly, the headaches don't stop there. The report also talks about another data breach they announced in 2023 that hit 37 million accounts. Then there's an ongoing antitrust lawsuit that says their big merger with Sprint actually hurt competition. They're also fighting with the FCC over customer privacy. Oh, and to top it all off, they had to just write off $278 million for a new billing system that they just decided to scrap completely. Ouch.
And look, T-Mobile knows all this. They're fully aware of the challenges. This quote right here, it's pulled directly from the risk factors section of their own report. It's kind of a standard legal thing to include, but it's still really important. They're basically admitting, on paper, that their entire strategy, growing by buying other companies, comes with a whole bunch of serious risks.
All right, so we've looked at the billions they're spending, how they're getting the money, and all the risks that come with it. So what's the big picture here? What's the main takeaway from digging through this whole report?
Well, the strategy itself is crystal clear. T-Mobile is all in on aggressive expansion. They are spending an absolutely staggering amount of money to buy more customers, to grow their network, and to force their way into brand new industries like advertising and home internet. Simply put, they are buying growth everywhere, all at once.
So what we're really watching here is a massive, high-stakes gamble playing out in real time. T-Mobile is pushing all its chips to the center of the table, betting billions that all these purchases and all these risks are what it's going to take to secure their spot at the top for the next decade. The only question left is, will that bet pay off, or are we watching the start of a cautionary tale? That right there is the multi-billion-dollar question.